Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is 6 o'clock. And okay, so this evening, what we want to do, we know one of the most complex thing in applying for college is question is, how do I pay for it? And that's a lot of issue that parents and students come up with. There is financial aid, but there's also other additional information as to how to apply for scholarships and certain grants. So this evening, we just want to present an information session and talk about how to fill out the application for financial aid and any other information. So we have a guest with us, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself and tell us her role with GSFC.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'm Adrienne Langford. I am an outreach representative for Georgia Student Finance Commission. And we are happy to be a part of your event tonight.
Okay, so we want to just go ahead and get started. We are streaming this on to Facebook and also have it recorded to share with families in different schools in the future. So I would just let you go ahead with your presentation. If we get any questions, then I ask those questions, or otherwise I may just ask questions that I think parents or student may need to know. So it's all yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. So the first step for high school seniors and any student seeking funding for post-secondary education is to complete the FAFSA. Some may refer to a post-secondary institution as a college, a university, a technical college, or even a community college. During this presentation, we will refer to each as an institution. Now, this evening, we will define the FAFSA and explain the application process for creating an FSA ID to completing the FAFSA. Now, FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and it's one of the key ways to access more money to pay for a student's education. A student should never pay for assistance to complete the FAFSA. Please remember that this application is free. The FAFSA is simply a form created by Federal Student Aid that is made available each year on October 1st. Primarily, the FAFSA is used to determine a student's eligibility for federal aid. In some states, such as Georgia, the FAFSA is also used to apply for state-supported funding, such as the HOPE program. The best part about completing the FAFSA is that this one application can be used for multiple institutions for financial aid packaging, which includes both types of aid, federal and state. Now remember that the FAFSA is used for students to apply for federal aid and state aid. However, a student must meet certain eligibility requirements in order to receive federal aid. These requirements are for the student, not the parents. So let's focus on a couple. One, the student must be a US citizen. Students who are part of a mixed documented family can submit the FAFSA because the student is eligible regardless of the parent's status. Another requirement is that you plan to enroll in an eligible certificate, diploma, or degree program at an institution. And lastly, all males seeking federal aid are required to register for the Selective Service. And to make registering easier, the student can simply mark yes to one question on the FAFSA. The FAFSA is used to determine eligibility for funding from the federal aid programs, including Pell Grant, FSEOG, work study, and loans, which help pay expenses associated with the cost of attendance while enrolled at an institution. For students attending HOPE-eligible institutions, some of the information from the FAFSA is also used to determine eligibility for Georgia's HOPE program. Now let's get back to the FAFSA. Creating an FSA ID is the first step in the process of applying with the FAFSA. The FSA ID is actually a username and password, which is created by the student and then it's used to track federal grants and loans, give access to the IRS data retrieval tool, and sign the FAFSA electronically. If a student is a dependent student, then a parent will also need an FSA ID. The parent will use their FSA ID to access the IRS data retrieval tool, as well as to sign the FAFSA electronically.
Well, let me ask a question. When you say that a dependent student, can you tell what the difference and what's meant by that?
Sure, that's actually later on in the presentation. There's a few slides down, and we'll go through it thoroughly. So please note, to access the FAFSA, the student will always need to use their FSA ID to log in. The parent FSA ID would not be used to access the FAFSA, only to sign it. Now, to create an FSA ID, visit fsaid.ed.gov and complete the requested information. The FAFSA is the student's application. Therefore, students should create their own FSA ID, their own security questions, and when completing the two-step authentication, the two-step process, use their own email and cell phone number. Here are a few tips. Students will use the FSA ID for years. It is important to create a username and unique password that can be remembered. But if forgotten, students can use the Forgot My Username or Forgot My Password features on the FSA ID website. Now, we discussed when the FAFSA is made available each year, the deadlines, what is needed to start the FAFSA, and the types of eligible funding. Now let's talk about how to submit. FAFSA.gov and the My Student Aid app are the only ways to submit the FAFSA. Students must use their FSA ID to log in. Once students log into the FAFSA.gov, there will be two applications available. Applicants must select the appropriate FAFSA for a specific enrollment period. So for those that will attend college in the fall of 2021, you must complete the 2021-2022 FAFSA. If you are attending college in the summer of 2021, you must complete the 2021 FAFSA and then also complete the 2021-2022 FAFSA for the fall of 2021. Because you have created your FSA ID before starting the FAFSA, some of your personal information is already populated in the FAFSA, like your first name, your last name, date of birth, and social security number. There will be a few more questions to determine your eligibility for federal aid. Under student demographics, you will continue with 4 more questions. What will your high school completion status be when you begin college? You want to select the appropriate option. What college degree or certificate will you be working on when you begin the school year? Again, selecting the appropriate answer. What will your college grade level be when you begin the school year? Even if you are a dual enrollment student in high school, you will still select never attended college first year. And if you are interested in a part-time job while you are in school, please answer yes to the "Are you interested in being considered for work study" question. Now, while completing the FAFSA, you must list at least one school to receive your information. The schools you list will use your FAFSA information to determine the types and amounts of aid you may receive. You can use the federal school code search to find the colleges you're interested in and including on your FAFSA. And you can add up to 10 institutions. Since admissions is a different process, students do not have to be accepted or even have applied to list the institution on the FAFSA. Now, every student is considered dependent or independent for federal aid. There are several questions to determine a student's dependency status. If a student answers no to all of the questions, they are considered dependent, which means parent information is required. If a student is considered independent, only student information is required. Independent status results from answering yes to any of the 10 dependency questions. So let's highlight a few. If you can answer yes to if the student is 24 years old or older, if the student is legally married, if the student is a parent and provides more than half the financial support for their child, if legal guardianship was determined by a court of law to someone other than the student's parent, or if the student is considered an unaccompanied youth who is homeless or at risk of being homeless. Unaccompanied youth means the student is not living in the physical custody of their parent or guardian. And homeless means the student is displaced from sufficient housing, such as living in a shelter, hotels, public spaces, or temporarily living with other people because they have nowhere else to go. Remember, answering yes to any one of these questions will make a student independent and parental information is not required.
Can I ask a question? And I know because I've had some students ask this before. What happens when when a student may not meet this dependency status? However, for whatever reason, a parent does not want to provide their financial information on behalf of the student.
They would actually have to do what's called a professional judgment. And we talk about this a little bit later in the presentation. They would actually have to complete a professional judgment with the financial aid office at their institutions. And each institution requires different documentation. So it's really up to the college as to what type of paperwork they're going to require for them to be able to be eligible for any type of financial aid.
Okay.
Now, most students graduating from high school will be considered dependent and have to include parental information. So this chart just kind of tells you who is the parent in the household. So if the parents are living together, both parents must be included on the FAFSA, regardless of marital status. If the parents are living in separate households, the student will pick the parent they live with the most in the last 12 months. If that parent is remarried, the step parent must also be included on the FAFSA. If the student lives with both parents equally, the parent who financially supports the student the most will be included on the FAFSA. Maybe the student is living with someone other than a parent or a step parent. For example, a sibling, a grandparent, aunt, or uncle. The student could be considered independent and will not have to provide parent information. Now, to make the process easier for parents to add their tax information, the FAFSA includes a feature called the IRS data retrieval tool that transfers specific tax information into the form. If parents are unable to use the tool for any reason, the FAFSA can still be submitted by entering the information from the tax return directly into the FAFSA. At the end of the FAFSA, the student's FSA ID and the parent's FSA ID are needed to sign and submit the FAFSA electronically. For parents who do not have a Social Security number but have a tax identification number, there are other options to sign. Simply print the signature page, sign, and date, and mail to the address listed. Now, we have two great checklists to help with the FAFSA process. So please feel free to visit gafutures.org, and the checklists are provided under resources. Now, let's explain how to complete the process. Once you have submitted the FAFSA, you will receive a confirmation page from Federal Student Aid via email. The page will include important information such as Pell Grant and direct loan estimates, and the expected family contribution or EFC number. A student's EFC is not the amount of money that their family will have to pay. It is a number calculated from information on the FAFSA. That number determines the amount of federal aid a student is eligible to receive. And the EFC results from these factors. This includes the family size, the number in college, savings, and assets. Certain assets are not included in the EFC calculation, such as the primary residence, if it is the only home, and the value of retirement accounts like an IRA or a 401k will not be considered. Now, after the FAFSA is submitted, another email will come through within a week that confirms the application has been processed successfully. Once students receive the notification, they should log back into the FAFSA to review their student aid report. The student aid report will contain some of the same information that was reported on the confirmation page. However, it would also advise if a student needs to submit additional documentation to the financial aid office of their institution. So this is also where you will find that information if the student doesn't include parent information, but they answered no to all the questions, the student aid report will provide guidance on next steps in terms of visiting their local financial aid office or their institution's financial aid office. So if your household financial situation has changed drastically since the information on the tax return, a student can discuss a special circumstance, sometimes referred to as a professional judgment, with the financial aid office at the institution the student listed on the FAFSA. Each office has their own process and may not require all of the same documentation. Now here, I just wanted to point out a little bit of information about financial aid packages. A financial aid package, sometimes called an award letter, tells students what financial aid they can receive at an institution. Now remember, a student can list up to 10 institutions on the FAFSA. However, if they have not applied for admissions or have not been accepted, those institutions will probably not provide a financial aid packet. Now, gafutures.org is Georgia's primary resource to help students plan, apply, and find affordable ways to pay for their post-secondary education. So please check our site often for resources, including scholarship information and upcoming webinars. And those are, a couple of those have passed, but we do have a webinar coming up on April 13th about the HOPE programs. And I also wanted to show you our territory map. So each student, parent, and institution has an outreach representative. So please feel free to reach out to any one of us and let us help you plan, apply, and pay for college. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for all of the latest and greatest information about financial aid, tips, resources, reminders, and more. Please search for either GA Futures or Georgia Student Finance Commission. And so, Mr. Davis, I wanted to stop here. This is the end of my presentation, but I wanted to stop here and see if you have any questions.
One of the questions, I guess, what I hear a lot of is when to actually fill out the application. I know that you said that, I mean, the information comes out October the 1st. And I hear sometimes even and we always say the sooner you can fill it out, the better. But then there are some parents or students think that they cannot fill out the applications until they file their taxes. So even though that they hear that the information is coming out in October, then they're normally delaying until they file their taxes for that year. So sometimes it could be in February, March, or at the April deadline. So what do you say parents should be doing in that situation? Because I think when you're waiting, and I often hear the sooner you can apply and make your application, the better. It may affect the amount of money that you have. The longer you wait, may be the less money that you may receive.
Right. So the FAFSA comes out on October 1st. So it used to be where it was the previous year's tax return that they were putting on the FAFSA, but now it's the 2 years before. So for example, the FAFSA for 2021, 2022 that seniors should be completing now is asking for the 2019 tax return. So when the FAFSA came out in October of 2020, everyone should have already filed their 2019 taxes. So that it's still, actually federal student aid has kind of taken away that reason of I need to wait for my taxes to be filed, because it's not that current year taxes, it's the year before taxes that go on the FAFSA now.
Okay, so I realize that most parents may not know that, and most students, because they're still on the assumption that if it's October, they don't need to wait to February, March. So what effect does waiting have on the amount of money that you may or may not receive, or the scholarships that you may qualify for?
Mm-hmm. So if there's institutional scholarships that you would apply, that you would qualify for, if it's on a first come, first served basis, then there's a good chance that funding could run out before your application is processed if you wait. So the earlier that you complete your FAFSA, the better. Also, most institutions, if not all, have what's called a priority deadline. So this is when they would highly recommend students have their financial aid completed, their FAFSA completed by that deadline, so that to make sure that they are able to receive everything that they're eligible for. Because some funding is first come, first serve. FSELG is a federal student grant that's available at some colleges and universities. That program does have a limit to it. So it's only the students that have applied in time that's eligible for it would receive it.
Okay, so if I'm a parent and I have a child that's thinking about going to college this fall, and I have not applied, so are you saying it's just too late for me and I shouldn't do anything? I shouldn't worry about it?
No, I'm not definitely not saying that. You still want to apply for federal financial aid. The application does not expire. So in order to receive any financial aid, federal financial aid, the FAFSA must be completed. So that you must complete that to receive any financial aid. You want to contact the institution that you are planning to attend or that the student is planning to attend to find out about their priority deadlines. And another thing that priority deadlines do is to make sure that the student's financial aid is there in time for the semester. So you don't want to start your semester and your financial aid hasn't made it there because your application was too late. Your financial aid can still come in, but you may have to pay out of pocket before it comes in because your application came in too late for it to come in time. Does that make sense?
Yes. So in
Okay.
essence, that even if I was a parent was to apply now, even though you may say, okay, I should have done it in October, I may still receive some money, but it just probably won't be as much if I had filed in October, November.
It depends on the university or the college. You can still receive, you may receive the same amount that someone in October applied. How am I trying to say that? Someone applied in October, you could receive the same amount, but that's also depends on if that school has additional financial aid available. So like that SEOG grant that I mentioned earlier, if they also were, they have the SEOG grant available. If the student that applied before the priority deadline, they may receive it when the student that applied after the priority deadline may not be eligible for that grant. But that doesn't stop them from being eligible for the Pell Grant or student loans or anything else that doesn't have a limit.
So, I mean, in essence, I would still need to fill out this FAFSA application, even if I mean, do I need to do it if I'm just trying to get, does it allow me to qualify for Georgia Hope?
Yes, so of course you have to meet the other deadlines, the other eligibility requirements for a Hope Scholarship, like the 3.0 GPA and the rigor courses, but the FAFSA does apply you for Hope programs and federal financial aid.
So if I don't fill out this application, will I still qualify for Hope?
You can qualify, but if you did not complete the FAFSA or the GSF apps, which is the application just for the Hope, you will not receive it.
So in essence, if I'm thinking about any money for college, this still ought to be my first step.
Yes, in order to receive any federal financial aid, you must complete the FAFSA, be it early, on time, or late. That's the only way to receive
Right.
it.
So even though if I may be late, I'm still better off filing something today, and it may not be as much, but like you said, it could be based on what the school's qualification is. So it's because I hear people saying, well, it's too late. And what you're saying is really not too late. You may get the same amount that you would have gotten had you applied in October, or at least you'll get something. But if you don't fill it out, you empty and broke, right?
Right. So if you don't fill it out, you'll receive nothing for sure. If you do fill it out, or even if it's late, you can still be eligible for financial aid. It just might come in later. So and this is still early, this is March. So I don't know what the college's priority deadlines are, but they will still package your financial aid even after those deadlines. So when I say late, I'm saying if you're starting September 1st and you're completing your FAFSA August 1st, it's going to be late. It's not going to be there in time for that September 1st. So you probably will have to pay for classes at the beginning. And then when your financial aid comes in 2 or 3 months later, then it can reimburse you for what you've already paid for.
Yeah, because I've heard horror stories that take place in August and September where parents have taken their kids to the college. They got an acceptance letter, but they can't get in a room because their financial aid hasn't come through.
Right, right. So when you wait to, the last minute or a couple of months, and just really communicating with the colleges. The colleges are usually very clear on when that application has to be completed in order for your financial aid to be in on time. And keep in mind, when we say a deadline in terms of your financial aid being completed, they mean everything's completed, not just the FAFSA, because once a student applies with the FAFSA, they could be selected for verification, which means that the school will be asking for tax returns, a copy of the tax returns, and other documentation. So that's also part of the process sometimes, not every time. Students are selected for verification randomly, or if something on the FAFSA causes a flag. But that's also part of the process. So parents have to make sure, students and parents have to make sure that they are completely finished with the financial aid application process by the deadline in order for their funding to be there by the time school starts.
Okay.
Anytime after that deadline, you do run the risk of your financial aid just not being there in time for your first class.
Okay. So if I'm thinking about college and it's October, so I know that I need to fill this out. And you say that I can pick up to 10 colleges. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I pick those 10 colleges. If these are 10 colleges that I'm picking, I should also at the same time be looking at what their requirements are for financial aid. Is that also correct?
Yes. So you
And
definitely want to be just keeping aware of what their priority deadlines are. And also those 10 colleges, you do have to be, in order to find out about what you're eligible for with them in terms of financial aid, you do have to be accepted at those 10 colleges. So the application to be accepted to a college is a completely separate process from financial aid. But in order to receive a financial aid package or award letter from a school, you have to be accepted at that school.
okay. So what if I have more than 10 colleges?
Once your FAFSA is processed, you are welcome to go back in and take some schools off and put more schools on. Because once it's processed, that means those schools now have access to that application. So if you need to add more schools, you can go in and take 5 off and put 5 new schools on and resubmit the FAFSA.
Oh, okay. Uh, I think all this information is helpful. Is there any other additional information you think we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I would just always recommend students and parents to contact the schools and find out what they need to do in terms of their FAFSA, their financial aid. If they've already submitted the FAFSA, they want to see if they have any other documents that's needed from the financial aid office to complete their file. That's the main thing I would definitely recommend, just from my years of experience in higher ed. It's just that students and parents need to be in contact and communicate with the financial aid office just to make sure the file is complete, so that there's no surprises when they show up to campus on that first day of school or
Okay.
the week before school.
So you showed earlier I guess a map of the state with different broken down by district. And what was that again? Can you show that again?
Sure. So this is our GSFC representative map, and all of us are outreach representatives. You can feel free to contact us. That's our email and phone number. Again, I'm Adrienne Langford. Feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email if you have any questions.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so I just want to leave that up so, like I said, that people can see that and know how to reach you. And we'll just leave it up when we get on the video. So, I mean, I think you basically covered everything. And some of the questions I asked, I just know that I've heard from students and parents. Uh, do I have to wait to get file my taxes? And the answer to that is no, because it's going to the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I haven't done it. Is it too late? No, it's never too late. You just need to get it in, and you need to contact the schools that you're applying for to find out what their deadlines are. And you don't want to wait too late, because you don't want that. I've heard those horror stories. I can't get my child in school because they still waiting on financial aid. And especially, well, not now during the pandemic, but we have the dorms are full. So I can't, my child has nowhere to live because we're still waiting. And
Oh,
sadly, sometimes some of the parents are not financially able to go ahead and make some payment and wait till that financial aid comes in.
right, right. Yeah, that's definitely, I've seen that a lot also. And my recommendation is just to get it done as soon as possible. But if you're still late, then just keep communicating with the financial aid office. It's a process. It's going to take time. Is applying for financial aid and completing the FAFSA is not an instant process. Sometimes it takes longer if they're selected for verification. So just staying on it is most important. Parents and students just paying attention and looking for that information, because your financial aid office is definitely going to send you alerts. They're going to send letters and emails letting you know what's missing or what they still need. So it's good to keep an eye out for that, because if your file is not complete, the money just will not be there. It's going to
Well,
be.
that's about as simple as you can put it.
That's just what and it could be, if it's late, it's late. But like you said, a lot of people do not have the money to pay for college ahead, pay for college that day and be reimbursed. So
Yeah,
my
and then,
advice is to definitely stay on top of it.
I mean, and the other part of that, if they can't, and then that student normally uh, does not start that semester, and then sadly, some of them just lose interest. Like, I'm not going now,
Right,
because they
right,
get frustrated. And instead of saying, okay, it'll be ready, maybe instead of August, I start in January. But
right.
sometimes they just get frustrated and they start working. And when you're 17 or 18 and you start working, you think that's your career, and college is no longer in your plan. So, I mean, so it's
Mhm.
important, I guess, to know all of this. I think that's everything. And what I would like to ask, if you could, what we're seeing now, if you can just send that to me so I can
Sure.
share that. Uh, and I think you answer all the basic questions that I normally hear from
Perfect.
parents and from students. And like I said, we are recording this, so I will continue to share that. But I also would like to share this map so they can know, I mean, depending on which district they're in, who's the person to contact.
Perfect. No problem at all.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing this. And I hope that those who are watching and those who find this information helpful. And remember, the main points is, one is that just because it's October, you don't have to wait. You just use the prior year. And even though you think it's too late, that you still ought to go through the process, you ought to apply. And two, you should always know what that school that you're applying for, what their requirements are as it relates to financial aid, and look at all of it. Look at all of it and see what you qualify as it relates to any scholarships or hope or anything like that. Check and find out what the eligibility levels are. So I think
Mhm.
the key thing is, normally I would say, is even though we're saying October, most of the time you're looking at October or your senior year, sometimes I don't think it's ever too early to start looking and starting to plan instead of waiting for that senior year.
Right. True. I totally agree.
All right. So Ms. Armstrong, I mean, Ms. Langford, thank you very much, and
You're
have a,
welcome.
have a good and safe evening. And I appreciate that. And I hope those who are watching uh, found this to be helpful. And because, hey, we all know times are tough, and if money is out there, find a way and take advantage of it. But your first step is to fill out this application.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right.
You have a
Thank you.
great evening.
All right. You too.
Okay. Bye bye.